Welcome to Body Solutions, where total physical fitness is directed by physical therapists. Today I'm going to talk about more advanced shoulder exercises designed to help the shoulder joint become more stable, stronger, with increased ability to produce power and strength. The key to all those components relies in the weakest link. And what I mean by that is you're only as strong as whichever muscle that's involved with the shoulder complex in terms of the strength limitation of that muscle. And typically it's not going to be, the chest muscle, people bench, the shoulder muscles, people do sort of overhead presses, and even sort of the back posterior muscles of the shoulder. Typically in the clinic we find that people have a weakness in what's called the rotator cuff muscles. Those are the muscles that help rotate the shoulder while you move. And also when you're sort of reaching, striking, lifting, kettlebell lifting, those movements require the rotator cuff muscles to keep the joint stabilized. So in this segment we're going to talk about more advanced positions, to help shoulder stability in these higher plane motions, more dynamic diagonal type motions. Whereas in our earlier segment we just talked about stability sort of with the shoulder down here and sort of stable up in here. So here we go. We're going to go through some exercises. The first one is similar to the exercise I showed last time, but today we're going to make it a little bit more dynamic. We're going to do sort of a motion like this, and in sort of physical therapy world, this is called a PNF, or a proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, which is fancy for how our body was designed to move in these diagonal patterns. So you're going to do sort of a PNF direction 2 with one arm, and a PNF direction 1 coming across like this with the other arm. If you notice, when I come up across, my palm faces up and then turns and faces down. So up, down. Now we're going to combine those movements into one exercise like this. One exercise. Right, so we're sort of working the external rotators of the right shoulder and the internal rotators of the left shoulder. Sort of a combination exercise like this. And you can also go to the opposite direction as well. Again, there's elbow, wrist, and shoulder movements all happening at once. And the reason we want that is because our brain is used to contracting these muscles in that pattern. We really don't move in these sort of straight line patterns, right? Like a bench press or a sort of a shoulder press. And the reason I like the bands is because as you get better, you can go sort of high speed like this. And the great thing about bands is you don't have to work on slowing them down. So the drawback to traditional weights or even kettlebells, at some point in the lift, you have to slow the weight down, right? Because that weight has momentum, and it takes muscle effort to slow them down. And that's a drawback, because in sports, when you're pushing things or when you're punching, there is no sort of weight to slow down. You basically apply maximum acceleration through. Okay, so the bands give you that advantage. So this is sort of more of a dynamic exercise. And a combination of those two movements will help strengthen your rotator cuff in what's called the most natural plane of motion or natural pattern of motion. Okay, so that will sort of work on the most important aspect of the shoulder. Now another aspect of the shoulder that has to do with shoulder stability and shoulder injury prevention are the shoulder blade muscles. Okay, so a lot of people work on heavy rows and they're sort of working their back muscles, which do help stabilize the shoulder blade. But there is a muscle that's called the serratus anterior that a lot of people miss. It's sort of a weird motion where when that muscle contracts, it sort of rounds your shoulder blade forward, rounds it forward, right? So most people work the retractors, the muscles that bring the shoulder blades together like this, but not many people work resistance for muscles that do this for the shoulder. And that's very important because anytime you do anything overhead like this, that muscle is the main muscle that prevents the shoulder blade from coming away from your ribs. Okay, the problem with weakness in that muscle is that as you're doing these movements, if your shoulder blade comes away, which in clinical terms is called scapular winging, if that happens, the shoulder is now in an unstable or more compromised position. Because how your shoulder blade sits controls where your shoulder joint is oriented. and that largely dictates how well your shoulder can function and exert force. So this is another exercise that you can do where you sort of hold a push-up position and you squeeze the shoulder blades away and together. If you notice, my elbows are locked. I'm not doing a push-up, right? It's all in the shoulder blades. So those exercises, you can do sets of 15 or 20 repetitions. Again, you want to build the endurance as well as the strength of them. If you're strong enough, you can also do on one arm on the floor. Okay, that's probably needed for some of you guys who are already very strong. You know, if you can push a lot of weight, you probably can do that with one arm. And again, just keep in mind that when you bring up these weakest link muscles, all your lifts, all your power producing movements, your ability to control another person if you're into martial arts, they all improve because you're bringing up that weakest link that can help stabilize the shoulder better. When the shoulder is more stable, then your outside muscles, the muscles that actually produce power, can have more force exerted through that shoulder. Because if those muscles are weak, the shoulder's sliding around inside, and you're not going to be able to produce the same amount of power. Okay?